Deep within the dense rainforests of Sierra Leone and Liberia, a terrifying legend once dictated the law of the land. For decades, colonial authorities and local tribes lived in fear of a shadow that struck without warning. They were known as the Leopard Men, a secret society of warriors who did not just hunt like predators, but transformed into them. Clad in leopard skins and armed with steel claws, they left behind a trail of mystery that blurred the line between ritual and terror. But behind the frightening masks was a complex organization fighting for power, tradition, and survival in a changing world. This is the true story of the Anyoto, the men who became beasts. Let's go deep into the well. The origins of the Leopard Men, known in many regions as the Anyoto, are buried deep in the ancestral traditions of the West African jungle. This was not a random group of criminals, but a highly structured and disciplined secret society. In many African cultures, the leopard is the ultimate symbol of power, cunning, and royalty. To become a leopard was to tap into a primal force that commanded respect and absolute fear. The society emerged as a shadow government, often operating in the gaps where official tribal laws or colonial rules failed to provide justice or order. They acted as judge, jury, and executioner. Membership was a lifetime commitment, often passed down through bloodlines or forced upon initiates through complex and harrowing rituals designed to break their old identity. They believed that by wearing the skin of the predator, they inherited its spirit, becoming invisible to their enemies and untouchable by any human law. This was an elite brotherhood, bound by blood and a terrifying oath of silence that ensured their survival for generations within the deepest parts of the forest. Transformation into a leopard man was a meticulous and calculated process. It was not a matter of magic, but a sophisticated form of psychological and physical theater designed to deceive the eyes of any observer. Members wore tunics made from actual leopard skins, which were carefully tailored to obscure the human silhouette in the dappled, moving light of the jungle floor. Their primary weapons were not spears, knives, or guns, but three-pronged or four-pronged steel claws designed to be held firmly in the palm of the hand. When they struck, they meticulously imitated the attack of a feline predator. They would slash the throat and chest of the victim, leaving deep, jagged marks that were indistinguishable from those left by a real animal. To complete the deception, they used carved wooden blocks to press paw prints into the soft mud around the scene of the crime. This ensured that any witness or investigator would blame a rogue animal, allowing the human killer to walk back into his village unnoticed, his lethal tools hidden away until the next summons. While the outside world saw them as nothing more than ritualistic killers, the Leopard Men were deeply political actors. In Sierra Leone and Liberia, they often acted as the enforcement arm for powerful local chiefs or influential elders who needed to maintain control. If a rival grew too powerful, or if a member of the community broke a sacred taboo or threatened the established hierarchy, the Leopard Men were summoned. Their attacks were calculated messages meant to maintain the status quo through absolute dread. By using a predator as their cover, the society could eliminate political opponents without sparking a blood feud between rival families. You could not seek revenge against a leopard, it was seen as an act of nature or a divine punishment. This divine justice kept entire regions in a state of total obedience, as the fear of the jungle became the most effective tool for social and political control. The Leopard Men were the invisible hand that ensured tradition was respected and that those in power remained there, undisputed. When British and French colonial administrations began to push deeper into the interior of Sierra Leone and Liberia, they encountered a wall of absolute silence. Murders were happening with terrifying frequency, but no one in the villages would speak to the investigators. The colonial police were baffled by bodies found with animal-like wounds in areas where leopards had long been hunted out or driven away. It took years for the authorities to realize they were not dealing with a wildlife problem, but a sophisticated insurgent organization. The Leopard Men saw the European colonizers and their new laws as a direct threat to their ancient traditional power structures. In response, the colonial governments were forced to pass the Leopard Society Ordinance, a drastic legal measure that made the mere possession of a leopard skin, a steel claw, or even certain ritual medicines a crime punishable by death. The jungle transformed into a silent battlefield between the modern, bureaucratic law of the West and the ancient, predatory shadows of the African interior. One of the most famous and well-documented crackdowns occurred in Sierra Leone in 1912. A special court was established by the British to deal with a sudden and violent surge in leopard attacks that had paralyzed the region. Hundreds of people were arrested, and the subsequent trials revealed the staggering reach of the secret society. To the shock of the colonial administration, high-ranking tribal officials and respected community leaders were found to be active members, proving that the organization had penetrated every single level of local society. The trials were a sensation in the international press, which portrayed the Leopard Men as primitive warriors, a narrative the colonial powers used to justify even harsher control over the region. Dozens of men were eventually found guilty and hung in public executions intended to break the spirit of the society. The Anyoto did not disappear, they simply retreated further into the darkness, moving their most secretive operations to the even more remote and unmapped territories along the Liberian border. The true effectiveness of the Leopard Men lay in the psychology of the human leopard. In the deep jungle, where the line between the physical world and the spiritual realm is perceived as very thin, the belief that a man could truly shapeshift was widespread and unquestioned. This belief was the society's greatest weapon. Victims would often offer no resistance, paralyzed by the spiritual terror of facing a being they believed was supernatural. The Leopard Men cultivated this terrifying image through secret nighttime ceremonies and the use of sacred medicines. They created a cycle of fear that made the society nearly invincible against internal betrayal. To testify against a leopard man was not just to risk death, but to invite a permanent curse upon your entire bloodline, ensuring that for decades, the society remained unpunished and whispered about only in the safety of locked rooms. The human leopard became a ghost that haunted the collective psyche of the region, a predator that was felt even when it was not seen. Across the border in Liberia, the Leopard Men operated with even more freedom than they did in Sierra Leone. The vast, unmapped hinterlands provided a perfect sanctuary from any form of central government. Here, the society was often intricately tied to the Poro and Sandy secret societies, which governed the transition from childhood to adulthood and enforced the moral codes of the tribes. The Leopard Men acted as the brutal police force for these initiations. Rumors of ritual cannibalism often surrounded the Liberian chapters, with stories of heart-eating to gain the courage and strength of the victim. While colonial reports and Western observers likely exaggerated some of these claims to demonize local traditions, the reality of ritual killings to strengthen the society's spiritual power was a documented fact that continued well into the middle of the 20th century. In these remote areas, the law of the leopard was the only law that truly mattered, far surpassing any authority coming from the distant capital of Monrovia. As the 20th century progressed, the power of the Leopard Men began to fade, though they did not go quietly into history. Increased urbanization, the spread of Christianity and Islam, and more effective modern policing slowly eroded the society's traditional power base. The imagery and the terror of the Leopard Men never fully vanished. During the chaotic and brutal civil wars that gripped Liberia and Sierra Leone in the 1990s, the symbols of the Leopard Men resurfaced in a new and horrific way. Warlords and child soldiers adopted animal skins, ritualistic masks, and extreme violence, consciously tapping into the old fears to intimidate their enemies and civilian populations. While the formal Anyoto society may no longer rule the jungle as a structured shadow government, the psychological blueprint they left behind, the idea of the warrior predator who exists outside of human morality, remains a powerful and terrifying part of the region's cultural memory, proving that some shadows are impossible to fully cast out. The most chilling reminders of the Leopard Men are the rare historical photographs found in colonial archives and museum basements. These images show captured members standing beside their tools of the trade, the tattered, heavy leopard skins, the crude but lethal steel claws, and the wooden blocks used to fake animal tracks. Looking at these faces, one does not see simple monsters, but men who chose to step entirely outside of conventional human morality to protect a way of life and a form of power that the modern world was determined to erase. They showed that fear remains the most effective form of government and that a mask can be far more powerful than a gun. Though the rituals have ended and the jungle has grown over their secret paths, the legend of the men who walked like beasts still haunts the shadows of the West African forest. Subscribe, ring the bell, and thanks for watching. Don't forget. I'll see you at the bottom of the well.